I was an advocate of DRS from the very start, and I was extremely upset with Dhoni and Tendulkar. Yes, Indranil, I not only have recommended that, I've also introduced a private member's bill in the last parliament. I do not want to see international cricket without DRS ever again. It takes it away from the underworld. Right now, the mafia, they're the ones who do things like match fixing and so on. How can we play with them when they are busy killing our soldiers? I would say cricket is once more a gentleman's game.
Hello everyone, you're on SK Live. I'm your host Indranil Basu. Today we have a very special guest. He is India's blue-eyed parliamentarian, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Sir, good to see you. How are you?
Very good, Indranil. Good to talk to a fellow Stephanian.
No, it's a pleasure, sir, that you came and you really took your time out. You have been very busy, I know. You've been doing so many webinars. You said around 150 you did so far.
Well, it's been 5 months, so it's actually probably an undercount because I don't think a single day has gone by without at least one or two. So that's life. But, on the other hand, it's turned out to be an opportunity to be able to reach people without traveling, which is actually quite a blessing because I've spent too much of my last few years waking up at odd hours, catching flights, herring off, hurtling around different corners of the country. And it's quite welcome in many ways to be able to reach people from here. Where are you sitting at the moment? In Delhi or somewhere else?
I'm in Delhi NCR, this place called Greater Noida. So
I see. Right.
Tucked away from the city life, where you can practice social distancing.
True, and it looks like you have a big amount of space behind you, which is good.
Yeah. So, but it's testing times. It's not a happy time. The way people are suffering outside. GDP all-time low, a lot of worried faces in media houses also. People are losing jobs. It's not a happy situation.
Not at all. You're quite right. And in fact, one of the sad things that I think for many of us in my party has been the extent to which the powers that be seem to have been indifferent to the plight of large numbers of our people. So many of our people have suffered. People have lost jobs, people have lost income, people have lost livelihoods. And the perception that no one cares, that there's no real assistance or stimulus coming their way, that has been particularly saddening.
Yeah, and if you have some good news, also someone is getting appointed somewhere, getting a good job, you really can't go and share because, the other person may not be in a good situation, in a happy situation.
Exactly. Very true, Indranil. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really testing time. So, why I invited you is to talk about the game we all love, which is cricket.
Right.
Okay. So my first question is cricket still a gentleman's game?
I think, it was heading almost irresistibly in the direction of being away from a gentleman's game. I think the nadir was struck in South Africa when David Warner persuaded Cameron Bancroft to use sandpaper on a ball. But the fact that was found out by the cameras, that exemplary punishment was issued, and that the greatest Australian player of the last couple of generations, Steve Smith, actually was suspended for a year. All of that, I think, has suddenly reversed the trend. And now, I would say cricket is once more a gentleman's game. And there are two reasons for this. So first of all is that entire episode reminded people that that's not what cricket's supposed to be about. The cricket's supposed to be a game where you play fair, play by the rules and win on merit, as well as luck, pitch conditions, weather, all of that, but you are not there to cheat. So that reminder has been extremely salutary, and the scale of the punishment on Smith and Warner, and of course Bancroft, who is the collateral damage in this exercise, that I think really put the fear of God in many who might have been tempted to go the wrong way. The second factor actually is technology, because there is nothing that makes a player more honest than knowing that the camera might catch him if he's not. Yeah. And whether it's the old days when fielders would claim catches that they knew had hit the ground first, but no one could tell it was their word, and often a friendly umpire from the same country would give them the catch. That's not possible anymore because the camera will reveal it, player can appeal it, whatever. And then the habit of walking, which had pretty much disappeared. There was such a handful of players who, when given out caught behind, if they knew they had nicked it, they would walk. Like
Yes.
Gilchrist was famous for that. Many players were not. But now, when the camera means that the odds of you being discovered are so incredibly high, more people are simply accepting the fact, the truth, and moving on. So, for all of these reasons, I would say that the gentlemen are once again going to rule the roost in cricket.
I hope so. It's so required. Coming to the sledging bit also, there is a notion that the foreign cricketers, they don't sledge Indians anymore because they have a fear of losing their IPL contracts. So what they're doing,
I did hear that theory. I don't know how true that is. Certainly, I believe an Australian player reacted to that claim. The claim was made by Michael Clarke, I believe, who had reasons to be bitter because after the episode of 2008, when India was touring Australia, no one gave him an IPL contract for 2 or 3 years. He was deliberately passed over in the bidding because he was seen as somebody who cheated and won a test match against India by claiming a catch he hadn't taken. But anyway, be that as it may, when Michael Clarke came up with that theory, some Australian player, I forget whom, responded that no, that's not true. When we're playing for Australia, it's Australia first. We don't think about the IPL. We're out there to win. But one of the reasons we're not sledging the Indians is, first of all, because they react with indifference, and secondly, they can also give it as much back to us as we can give it to them. So for both those reasons, I think the sledging is not that great. I find sledging a pathetic activity. I mean, I certainly, if I were ever a cricketer, I don't think I would indulge in it, except maybe to crack a joke. I've
yeah,
played amateur cricket in places like Geneva and Singapore and so on during my UN career, weekend games with a bunch of fellow amateurs. And very often people did the opposite of sledging. They were very gracious.
yeah,
Oh, skippers come out to bat, they would say, and show some respect when they're fielding behind you in the slips. Or pleasant comments, even good shots, and that sort of stuff. And that was the kind of spirit in which cricket used to be played at the amateur level. I understand professionals will not behave that way, but professionals at the same time can also observe the basic decencies and civilities, which they don't always seem to. However, again, don't forget stump mics have now also cut down sledging because
yes.
you're saying something totally offensive to one individual whom you're trying to hurt or provoke. That's one thing. But if what you're saying is being broadcast to the entire planet by a microphone on the stump, you'll think twice. That's also going to be a factor that will promote good behavior. So as you can see, I'm a huge fan of technology. I I was an advocate of DRS from the very start, and I was extremely upset with Dhoni and Tendulkar for refusing it. In fact, during the lockdown, I watch cricket while I'm on the treadmill, and every time I've been able to catch old matches, without exception, I have found episodes in which we were hard done by umpiring decisions that today would have been reversed on DRS. And I've never understood why our establishment was so allergic to DRS. I think it was just mistrust of the unfamiliar, because DRS is such a major innovation in cricket. I do not want to see international cricket without DRS ever again. It is so indispensable. It eliminates so many bad decisions, and it creates an additional form of excitement for the viewer as well, since most of us view cricket on television, even when there is no COVID lockdown, because we don't have time to go and sit and watch a 5-day match on the ground, most of us. In those circumstances, DRS adds an extra element of excitement and tension and a twist to the plot. So all of that has made it a very welcome addition as far as I'm concerned.
I guess we Indians are a little late to pick technology. We are little late on picking new things. I remember even T20 when it started, BCCI were the officials were really reluctant. For 2 years they struggled, and then ICL happened. All of a sudden they put on their cricket gear and started IPL in 2008. So I think we are a little late also in accepting change.
You're quite right, and despite the many mixed feelings people have about the IPL, I think certainly it was a tremendous innovation,
Yeah.
and it has, of course, accentuated the dominance of India in the commercial side of the global game. because during the days of Test cricket, we were already the heaviest contributor to cricket revenues. But once IPL came in, we became like a 90% player. I remember the late Arun Jaitley, during his time in the BCCI, saying to me when I was at the UN, he said, the Indian BCCI occupies or plays the same role in the International Cricket Council that the United States plays in your Security Council, the UN Security Council.
That powerful.
No, I mean, that was Arun Jaitley's remark that just as the US dominates the UN Security Council, gets a veto, persuades the other members to go along, that India had a similar or analogous role in the International Cricket Council, that everyone wanted to oblige India as much as possible. Everyone was trying to be supportive of us and supportive of our country's wishes because we were such a heavyweight in the global game. That was Arun's point.
Absolutely. Sir, you often said, and you often said it right, that British looted India, left, right, and center. But can we say safely that now we have looted cricket from them? It's our own game?
No, because looting involves, they're coming. And in fact, they introduced cricket to India not to teach us anything. They introduced cricket to India for themselves. It was purely a recreation for British officers and gentlemen. And initially, the only role that Indians were given was to be kind of ball boys, pick up the ball and so on. And then, of course, they gave some basic training for people to field. Eventually, bowling came. Some of the menial tasks were given to Indians in order for the English to enjoy themselves. So let's not have any illusions that cricket was a great civilizing gift to India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka. It wasn't. It was the English bringing it for themselves.
Yeah.
But then a couple of things happened, as with the English language. The Indians said, "This is not a bad thing. Let's seize on it." And so you've got, for example, the Parsis, who were very quick to adopt many English ways, also at it, to the point that by the 1860s, 1870s, there were Parsi teams that were able to hold their own playing against Englishmen.
Yeah.
That was the start of it. The second thing that started happening was that Indians started saying, listen, one way of showing these English people that our nationalism must be taken seriously, that we must be taken seriously, is to show them that we are capable of excelling at their sport. And so Indians took up both cricket and football very much in the spirit of showing up the English. In fact, Bengal was the crucible of Indian nationalism, as I'm sure somebody called Indranil Boshu must know with great pride. And in those days, it was an article of faith for Bengalis to live down the caricature of them by the British as effeminate babus. They wanted to show they were as capable of muscular male endeavors as the English claimed they were not. And this is why playing cricket became a very important accomplishment to demonstrate that, and playing football also. I mean, I think in 1911, a barefoot team of, I think it was Mohan Bagan, won the FA Shield, defeating an English team. And that was a major blow for the nationalist movement. Similarly, we had a huge cricketing victory. I think it was Presidency College against an English team, also in that second decade of the 20th century. And those were the first moments when Indians felt that the English would be forced to take them seriously as players. And then, as you know, we had the first Indian tour of England. No test matches were played, but they went. Then more touring teams started going. English teams started coming to play in India. And finally, we played our first test against them by 1932. So it took a long time to evolve, but it was very much Indian initiative to get to the point where we were good enough to show them we could also play.
Absolutely. And we are so good at the sport right now. And thanks to all the exposure we got over the years. Sir, tell us about your first memories, when you went to a cricket field with your dad. And, can you just run through that journey when you saw the game? You loved it. Yeah.
I like every Indian kid, I used to play in the corridors of my apartment or play in the Maidan. I tried to do everything. I used to joke, and it's actually true, that as a kid, my great ambition in life was to play cricket very badly. I just wanted to play cricket very badly. And as I grew up, I did exactly that. I played cricket very badly. So that was my joke. But the truth is that I was good enough when I was really tiny to be captain of the class team in class 3, to be vice captain in class 4, and then to be in the reserves by class 5. Why? Because I was an asthmatic child, and my peers were all developing and growing and becoming stronger and fitter and more agile, while I was wheezing for air and being confined to bed. So my ability as a player stayed at the very modest level, and my physical stature and health never permitted me to be very good. But my passion for the sport was colossal. Even as an asthmatic kid, I'd be sitting in bed playing book cricket, making up imaginary teams, following the radio commentaries in those days were the principal means of following matches. And my father, bless his soul, took me to my first test match when I was 11 and a half. It was England versus India at the Brabant Stadium in Bombay, 1963-64. And I remember some details with such vividness because the first morning of the first of the test match in Bombay, I think it was the first test, whatever it was, Kundaran, there was the Indian opening batsman, he was a wicketkeeper batsman, looked like a West Indian and played like one. And like in the first couple of overs, he hit a gigantic 6 that practically landed at my feet in the Bombay Gymkhana stands where my father had his tickets. And a few minutes later, he repeated the shot. This time it fell slightly short of the ropes. It was a 4. I was exhilarated. Then he was 16, went for another big shot against these really fast bowlers. You know, the bowler called Price, who was one of the fastest bowlers in the world at that time, hit it steepling up into the air. Ball came down. It was caught at mid-off by Fred Titmus. And Kundaran realized he was caught and out. As he was running, he hurled his bat up in the air, continued running, caught the bat by the handle as it came down, and ran onto the pavilion. I was hooked for life. I said, this is a sport that I really care about. Of course, I discovered with time that not everybody was a Kundaran or could play like Kundaran. Though I did see Kundaran again later in 1966-67 against the West Indies, making a very courageous 79 against the then fastest bowlers in the world, Hall and Griffith. So Kundaran had a lot to do with my passion for the game at that time. But I developed all my favorites, Jaisimha, Borde, Patodi were the stalwart. Then the spinners, the spin quartet, I watched them all come into being. I remember, unfortunately, being in bed with asthma when India, the following year, beat Australia at the Brabant Stadium. But I was hearing it on the radio while wheezing for breath when that happened. So my passion goes back very early and to my small childhood. I watched wherever I could. My parents got transferred. My father got transferred to Calcutta in 69. So I watched a fair amount of cricket at the Eden Gardens. Yes. Pretty much every winter there'd be a touring team. By then I'd started writing in our newspapers and magazines. And once or twice I even wangled a press pass to go sit in the press box and rub shoulders with the greats of cricket journalism. I met immortals like E.W. Swanton and John Woodcock. And I remember in the 72-73 England tour, Mike Braley, who had played for England and would later come back as captain, was at that point a reporter because he wasn't picked for the tour. And he was in the press box. And Swanton, I remember very graciously offering me some oranges. He had got himself some oranges and he saw this, 16-year-old kid with no business to be in the press box. I think I was the accredited correspondent of the Junior Statesman or something. And he offered me an orange, or at least a peel or two from his orange. So it was really these are things one remembers. And I think it was John Woodcock, the Times correspondent, the London Times correspondent, who had actually driven all the way from London in a car. Can you imagine coming to Calcutta, London to Calcutta by road the whole way through Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., all of which were more peaceful and tranquil than they have been since, and to make it. So all of these experiences I remember, but watching the match, I remember that particular day, or one of the days of the match that I was there, was certainly one of the most turgid days of Test cricket because India batted all day to make just 148 runs in an entire day's batting. And that included one over in which Wadekar hit 4 consecutive fours. So it's like seeing this incredible grey pall throughout the day and suddenly this burst of sunshine 4 times and then again back to it. So, one saw some pretty non-Kundaran-like cricket as well. in these days. But the memories are there, and I must say that when I've watched cricket in London at the Oval, at Lord's, I've watched cricket now more recently in some of the other English centres, Old Trafford and Headingley,
Yes.
that nothing can ever match the atmosphere that I remember from my childhood in either Brabourne Stadium or Eden Gardens. Brabourne Stadium, I watched a Ranji Trophy game between Mysore and Bombay, in which Wadekar made 323. And you won't believe it, this test stadium with a capacity of about 40,000 was jam-packed for a Ranji Trophy game.
Wow.
Today, I mean, I remember this, and foolishly, when my children were young, we were living in New York, I was working for the UN, and I used to take them to baseball, and I would keep telling them, "Arey, what is baseball? Nothing compared to cricket. I'm going to go and take you to a cricket match." And we were on holiday in Calcutta that winter, and I said, "We will get tickets and go and watch Bengal versus Orissa in the Ranji Trophy." And when I got there, I thought there was some mistake. No crowds, no traffic, no cars, no hawkers. What's going on? So we paid for our tickets and went into the stands, and we discovered there were more people on the ground than there were in the stands. Literally, apart from the players' pavilion, we were the only audience in the whole of Eden Gardens. I'm talking early 90s, so this is not a new phenomenon. Our crowds stopped supporting first class cricket once ODI cricket was invented. And I really think that was most unfortunate, because the real game is the long form.
So when you went to college in 70s, you remember Hindu St. Stephen's match? How many people used to? I heard stories of 5,000 people.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Hindu St. Stephen's Inter-College final, particularly, was phenomenal. In fact, one of the things that I did as elected president of the St. Stephen's College Union
Yes.
was to spend union funds in purchasing and distributing Vicks lozenges to our supporters so they could cheer all the more lustily for our side. And, you know, the standard was quite amazing. St. Stephen's used to produce test players right up to the 70s. Ashok Gandotra played for India. Arun Lal played for India. Praveen Oberoi played for Delhi. We had Hindu had Abhimanyu Singh and Surinder Khanna. Abhimanyu Singh played for Haryana. I think Surinder Khanna played briefly for India, 79 World Cup in England. So the standard of cricket was so good. And Mohinder Amarnath played for Khalsa College after having debuted at the age of 17 for India in 1969. So after being an India test camp, he came and played for Khalsa College in the Delhi University matches. And that took Khalsa up to the semi-finals. But Hindu and St. Stephen's still were in the finals during my 3 years in Delhi University.
Absolutely. And those were the golden days. Sir, did we have so much of politics in sports those days? Because we grew up covering, we covered more. Like I remember when you said about, seeing a match inside Eden Gardens, covering as a junior reporter, that was cricket match being covered. I mean, every detail of a match was covered. But then when we became journalists 20 years, it was more of, the politics of the game. The definition changed. I mean, can you tell us how it happened? I mean, why it was so simple?
I think journalism changed, not cricket. I think cricket always had politics, but they were brushed under the carpet. There was politics within teams. I'm told, for example, though on my one conversation with Pataudi, he denied it, that Pataudi couldn't stand Durrani, and that explained why Durrani played many fewer test matches than his ability would have warranted. That's one of the explanations given. The selectors were picked on a zonal basis. So the selection committee was always 5 people, 1 from each zone. Yeah. And they would play politics and trading off each other's favorites so that people would get picked who were quite unworthy of an India cap just in order to fulfill a zonal quota. That sometimes has worked in India's favor. For example, it's often been said that it was only the clout of the East Zone selector that got Saurav Ganguly into the Indian team in 91-92 for the tour of Australia, and turned out to be an inspired choice, not on that tour, but when he went to England in 95 and became the hero he became, and then subsequently one of our greats. So you sometimes benefited from people fighting for their region and players from their region, but the politics of that have blighted many Indian selections in the past, and very many excellent players either didn't get a chance to play because within their zone they were not the favorites, or because others of lesser ability were brought in from other zones to balance the side. And certainly a lot of West Zone players, Bombay and Maharashtra, felt very hard done by in the days of the 60s, for example, when Bombay was such a dominant side
Yes.
that many players from Bombay and some from Maharashtra who were good enough to play from India couldn't get in because they were already, 5 or 6 from the West Zone in the touring party, and they couldn't pick any more. Some Bombay players used to go and play for Rajasthan because it was easier to get selected on the Central Zone quota.
Yeah.
Even Raj Singh Dungarpur, who later became a very famous administrator, played all his cricket in Bombay, but captained Rajasthan. Kailash Katani, the fast bowler, same story. Very much a Bombay lad, played in Rajasthan, played for Rajasthan. So this kind of thing would happen. But politics that's motivated by money, that is what you guys were covering when you came into sports. That is politics, betting, gambling, corruption, match fixing. All of this did not exist 60s, 70s, and much of the 80s. It really started from the second half of the 80s. I think India winning the ODI World Cup in 1983 suddenly brought a whole lot of new eyeballs into the game, then new betting, big money, and all the other problems that happened. So then, of course, cricket administration became a power game. Money or the power to influence money was at stake. All these things happened. So sadly, I would attribute the phenomenon really to that period. But politics in the old-fashioned sense of me versus you and my side versus your side, my region versus your region, my boy versus your boy, that kind of politics has always been there and was there even in the so-called idyllic days of cricket.
Absolutely. So, these days we get to see, talked about betting bit, we get to see a lot of websites, trying to, give you an option where you make your team, you make money out of it. I don't know how it works. I've never been there. But don't you think we should legalize betting? And it's very important. This is what Lodha Commission also recommended, but nothing has been done so far. But this is a good way to earn money also for the government, isn't it, sir?
Yes, Indranil. I not only have recommended that, I've also introduced a private member's bill in the last parliament that would legalize sports betting for precisely the reasons you mentioned. Number one, it takes it away from the underworld. Right now, the mafia that controls betting syndicates and bets on matches, they're the ones who do things like match fixing and so on. An open, above-board legal betting system would not do that. Secondly, you can tax legal betting. And when you tax it, the revenues of the state go up. So I'm very surprised that a pragmatic government like the present one has not seen fit to do this. I think they're worried about the moralistic view that somehow there is something immoral about gambling and betting, and therefore to legislate it would cost them some votes or support. But if you explain to people why it's a practical thing to do, I think people will listen. Because we know that the current system, which does not legalize betting, has actually given birth to terrible misuse of inside knowledge, terrible flows of illegal and unaccounted for money, and, as we know, too many episodes of match fixing or even spot fixing. Maybe people don't fix an entire match, but they fix certain moments in order to make some quick bucks. All of these things need to be, if not ended, at least brought under control by a process of licensed and regulated legalization.
Absolutely, sir. We hope one day it happens. So how would India-Pakistan cricket look without politics?
That is a very tough, because I myself have written a book on Indo-Pakistan cricket. In fact, it was essentially published just around the time of it was written just about the time of the 26/11 massacre in 2008, which essentially ended bilateral cricket between the two countries. So I called it 60 years of India-Pakistan cricket. Since then, we've only ever played Pakistan in international tournaments. We have not had any bilateral tours of each other's country or even a neutral country. And as the book came out, I became a minister in the UPA government, and I was asked this question. And knowing full well that what I would say would be taken even more seriously because I was a minister, I said truthfully that I don't think that cricket can be a substitute for politics or diplomacy. I think that if the substantive political relations between the countries improve, then diplomats can use cricket as a means to warm the climate between the two countries. You can't do it the other way around. You can't say, let's play cricket and maybe our relations will improve. Because the problem is, there will always be voices saying, how can we play with them
Yeah,
when they are busy killing our soldiers, or busy sending militants to our country, or busy bombing our hotels and shops? So
yeah,
that kind of thing is an issue. Now, once I ceased being a minister, I took a slightly different line, and I should explain that to you. I do understand, and I have explained in some of my writings, which you can Google, that cricket will follow diplomacy and not lead it. But I would still say that the current negativism about Indo-Pakistan cricket expects cricket to bear a particularly unfair share of the burden. Because even while relations between the two countries were strained, I don't know if you follow hockey, there was a hockey tour of India by the Pakistan team. We lost, by the way. But they came here a year or two ago and had a full 5 match hockey series. We have had other sports,
yes,
including, I think, kabaddi and so on, taking place between the two countries. But because of the visibility of cricket, no bilateral cricket has been allowed. Why is that? Why is cricket supposed to do that? Secondly, I would argue if you are not suspending your diplomatic relations and withdrawing your ambassadors, but now we have withdrawn our ambassadors, but I'm talking about when I wrote this argument. If you can conduct your normal diplomatic relations and retain an ambassador, why can't you conduct your normal cricketing relations? Why should, again, cricket be held to a higher standard than diplomacy?
yeah,
So I nuanced my position along those lines. Now, of course, relations between India and Pakistan have become even worse. And we have actually withdrawn high commissioners from each other's country. There is no Pakistani high commissioner in Delhi, and there is no Indian high commissioner in Islamabad anymore. So, in those strained relations, I think cricket would be very unusual. But I would say that the day in which the two countries decide they can talk to each other and they will restore ambassadorial level contacts, we should also try and improve the atmosphere through a cricket thing. Because my own view is that while we have every reason to mistrust the government, and while we have even greater reason to mistrust the military, and of course we fully mistrust the jihadi elements, the Islamist terrorist groups that are flourishing with impunity in Pakistan, we don't have a quarrel with the majority of the Pakistani people, who are really no different from the majority of the Indian people. And therefore, people to people relations are, to my mind, the one way in which some sort of semblance of normalcy can be brought into the Indo-Pakistan relationship. Relations between poets, artists, writers, journalists, um, singers, actors, business people, and cricketers. Why not? That would be my gradual opening of the door before we get to the stage where we are actually showing much bonhomie with governments and militaries.
So you have seen so many Indian cricket captains. First is who is your favorite captain, and second is if you are leading the side, Indian side, do you think you need to be a good politician slash a good diplomat?
I think there's no question that all of those qualities are very important. I find your question incredibly difficult to answer because pretty much every Indian captain has been a favorite of mine as captain until somebody else came along and then I transferred my allegiance. So I thought Pataudi was an amazing captain, principally because of the example he set with his own courage. Imagine losing your eye at the age of 21, having to reinvent your batting action and still being a tigerish fielder in the covers and a courageous batsman against the best the world had to offer. Then, of course, Wadekar, because he won us 2 series we'd never won before against the West Indies and England. Then, briefly, Venkat was captain. He was leading a kind of evolving side. I had no envy for that. I liked Venkat's bowling very much and his guts as a lower order batsman, so I supported Venkat. Gavaskar, I'm a huge fan of his batting. I was less a fan of his captaincy because he was too cautious, in my view, as a captain. He drew a few matches that he could have won. He could have gone for a victory. But if you look at the scorecards of the Gavaskar era, there were too many matches drawn where India was in a considerable advantage, but he would not believe in risk-taking declarations or anything like that. But still, I personally, there is no Indian batsman I've ever admired more than I've admired Gavaskar. How much he showed us of what was possible for an Indian to do. Then when you come into the 90s, Bedi, I like Bedi very much as a person. I've got to know him since as well. He's a terrific character, but he may have been perhaps too temperamental as a captain, but somebody who had tremendous qualities. And then you come to the 90s. I thought Tendulkar was the best possible captain of India before he became captain. Because when he was not captain, he was so active. He was fielding in the slips, running up to the captain of the day, giving advice, giving encouragement, patting the bowlers on the back, giving them, and he was not captain. So I said, let's make this guy captain because he really is there, in every way. When he became captain, it didn't work out. He had a not terribly strong Indian team in his years of captaincy, but he also himself, I think, would admit that he was not the most inspirational, motivational captain, partially because he had his own batting to think about. And in the end, he happily gave up the captaincy and refused to take it back when it was offered again later. And if you like, Ganguly, because of his extraordinary fearlessness and courage and confidence, had a particular brand of captaincy. Dravid, very cerebral. Kumble, very knowledgeable. But Dhoni probably would be the one who would win my... if you had to oblige me to pick one person, Dhoni, because of the way in which he simply grew into the role and filled it. I mean, when Dhoni was captain of India, especially after his first exciting year when he won the T20 World Cup and so on, and settled into the role after that, the word captaincy almost became synonymous with Mahendra Singh Dhoni. You could see that the rest of the team looked up to him in every conceivable respect, as a player, as a leader, as a tactician, as a figure who inspired them, as somebody who led them, as somebody who never lost his head, always very calm and cool, captain cool. Now with Virat Kohli, we have a very different kind of captain. So he will not be a Dhoni in the way Dhoni was. But he has some things that I really do admire that were different from Dhoni. For example, the fact that he's always there. I mean, Dhoni sometimes came across as too laid back. Particularly in test matches, you got the sense that Dhoni wasn't driving the action as much as he effectively did in one-day matches. As captain, he was letting things drift a bit. Whereas Kohli will never let anything drift. The guy's on the ball. He's a bundle of energy. He's running after every catch. And sometimes we've lost catches because he needlessly tried to take a catch and somebody was in a better position to take. But that shows you his commitment. That shows you his level of energy. And he gives 100%. He gives it with tremendous verve. As a batsman, I think currently, in my mind, he is the best batsman in the world in all three formats. So he has all of these things. Dhoni was never the best in that sense. He was not the best wicketkeeper. He was not the best batsman. He had great qualities in both domains. His 183 not out against Sri Lanka, batting at number 3, was the best ODI innings I've seen. And I say that with a qualification because Kapil Dev's 175 against Zimbabwe was probably the greatest ODI innings of all time, but no one has seen it because no BBC was on strike when that match was being played. So there's no footage of it. But definitely of the innings I've seen, that 183 by Dhoni, unbelievable the way in which he commanded the ground. Even more dramatically than Rohit's double centuries, which were equally spectacular, but somehow there was something about Dhoni. So he could bat, but he didn't do anything like that again. Similarly, he had some amazing innovations as a keeper, particularly standing up. He had those very clever stumpings and runouts where he wouldn't even look at the stumps, get the ball and knock it in one move with his glove right onto the... All of those were fantastic. Those were great things. But I think it was fair to say that during his early years, Gilchrist was the best wicketkeeper batsman in the world. And today, there would be competition. I mean, today, of course, Dhoni has retired. But let's say in the latter part of Dhoni's career, there would have been competition for him as the best wicketkeeper from a number of players. And as the best wicketkeeper batsman, while there's room for debate and argument, many would say in the ODI format that Butler and in the Test format, Bairstow were at their peak, probably superior in terms of results. Just looking at England, similarly, Boucher in South Africa, similarly, Sangakkara in the one-day format for Sri Lanka, etc. So unlike Virat Kohli, whom we can confidently say is the best batsman in the world in all formats, we can't make an absolute statement like that about Dhoni. But I have no doubt that he was the best captain in the world for the team that he led. And that is something that I think when I think of Dhoni, I think captaincy first before I think anything else.
Absolutely, sir. You come across someone who is the purest of the game. You love cricket in white. So, do you love IPL as much as you love Test cricket?
No, nothing matches Test cricket. I explained it to my kids by saying, it's Test cricket is like reading a novel with many chapters, many episodes. The story gradually evolves. ODI cricket is like a short story, and T20 is like a sitcom. So you can enjoy them in different ways, but they cannot make the same lasting impact on you. So I forget sitcoms within 5 minutes of watching them. I may forget a short story within a few weeks of reading it, but a novel, especially a good novel that stays in the mind, can stay in the mind for a lifetime. So I remember Test matches from 45, 50 years ago. I can't say, in all honesty, that I remember any ODI match. I mean, I remember watching the video of the 83 World Cup final and how much it meant to be and so on. But for example, during these lockdown days where I'm watching so much old cricket on the treadmill, I mean, literally, sometimes they will rebroadcast the same match that I saw 2 weeks ago, and I'll realize I've forgotten what happened because they would, these ODI matches and T20s really are very ephemeral in terms of substance.
Absolutely, sir. You started off. I mean, you said about that Eden Gardens. I'm quite fascinated with that bit. When you covered one Test match in Eden Gardens as a junior reporter with the Statesman. So, what was your range of activity? Were you doing the sidelight stories? Were you covering the match? What did you do then?
No, to be honest, the Eden Garden stuff, the Statesman had its own full-time reporters. I did a piece for the Junior Statesman, the JS, covering my impressions, and it was like a sidelight story. It was about, for example, the oranges from Swanton and the conversations with Woodcock and that kind of stuff. And I then wrote a piece for the main paper, the Statesman paper, when I went to the Oval in 1975 on my way to graduate school in America and watched a Test match there. Since they had given me a pass in exchange for an article, which was a fair deal, I thought, because I didn't have to pay pounds that I couldn't afford as an impecunious student on a foreign exchange allowance of $8. Yeah. So I went to the Oval and sat in the press box behind Richie Beno and watched the game. And I wrote a piece about, is Test cricket dying? So if somebody is able to go to the Statesman archives in July or so, it was after watching an England-Australia Test match at the Oval, which witnessed the single most boring Test century I've ever seen made by a batsman called R.A. Woolmer, Bob Woolmer, who made 148 in about, I don't know, it felt like 300 hours. Totally bereft of any magic, any attractive stroke play, sheer drudgery. I can't even remember how the match ended. It probably was a draw. But the fact is that on that, I wrote a piece saying, is Test cricket dying? Contrasting that Test match I'd seen with the one-day matches in the Sunday League that I could also see on British television on the same visit. So I said it slightly mournfully because I preferred Test cricket to one-day matches. But I said one is so much more lively and interesting. How can you expect people to continue coming and watching this? Of course, the Oval was full. England still has a lot of loyalty to Test cricket, and those days they certainly did. But the fact is that the crowds deserve better. And I think what has saved Test cricket as a crowd sport today is the fact that first ODIs and then T20s have significantly accelerated the pace of the game. If you did a statistical study, which I haven't, but I have an instinctive feel for the number of draws in Test matches before T20s came into existence and the number of draws thereafter, I think you will find a very steep drop-off because thanks to T20, people have come up with more innovative strokes. You have reverse sweeps being tried in Test matches. You have more push for results. and the audiences are also demanding more by way of action. So, in my view, the T20 game has actually benefited Test cricket, and that's the one thing I would have in its favor. I think T20 is fun to watch live. I've been to many, many matches of the IPL, and I've found them tremendously exciting. The one thing you miss out on TV is depth, the dimension of watching the ball soar in the sky and come down, because on a screen, you can't see that depth. You can only see really two dimensions, not the third. And because you can't see that, you can't also often tell exactly which part of the ground the ball is going to. When you're in the ground, you have that. Second, you miss out on the crowd atmosphere firsthand. You can hear the sounds on your TV set, but on the ground, it's so essential, the atmosphere that you're breathing and hearing around you. And the third thing about being in the ground is that, unlike Test cricket, highlights of T20 are practically unwatchable. I mean, it's really, you just want to see what happened, because the whole tension of T20 is the evolution of the game. That even if a defensive stroke is played and it therefore slows down the asking rate or prevents somebody getting to the other side in time to hit a big shot the next over, whatever, all of those things, that's part of the excitement of a T20 match live. The evolution of the T20 match is absent from a T20 highlights, where you're really getting a highlights package of a highlights package. And I think that limits it. So T20, ideally watch it live. ODIs, I think highlights are fine. And certainly Test matches nowadays, for any working professional, you can only watch highlights. Treat yourself to a session or at most a day of an exciting match. But otherwise, the camera work is now so good. See, when I became a cricket fan, the filming of cricket was terrible. You go back to even now, some of the videos from the 70s and 80s, or films of the 70s, videos of the 80s. They're simply really not a patch on being at the ground, because you can't see things with great clarity. But today, especially with the advent of high definition television, I actually find that watching on television gives you a better experience than being at the ground of a Test match, because of the fact that you can see things in such crystal clear detail. And of course, if you're lucky enough to watch a Test match from somebody's box, where you can also have a TV set in the box, so you watch the live thing, get the atmosphere, and then when there is a DRS review or a dismissal, you can quickly go back to the TV set and see the same detail. Then it's all right. But if you're just sitting in the grounds, and I've tried both, then I think you're almost better off watching it on TV.
So, if you would have been doing commentary of a cricket match, it would have been such good fun, I tell you.
Well, I would have enjoyed it. Actually, as a kid, that was my other fantasy. As I said, I wanted to play cricket very badly. I also wanted to be a commentator very badly. And I used to, whereas others used to sing in the bathtub, I would invent snatches of commentary from imaginary Test matches in the bath, in the bath, and under the shower. So others are singing, and Shashi Tharoor is saying, and he comes into ball, a fast swinging delivery outside the match, off stump, that kind of stuff. That was my. But I was briefly given a spasm of an opportunity to come in, not on radio, which is where I really grew up listening to. So that's what I was thinking of. But on TV, I think it was Star Sports decided to telecast the inter-university matches 2, 3, 4 years ago. I can't remember exactly when. The semi-finals and the final, I think. And for one of the semi-finals, they brought me in as a guest commentator for 1 or 2 hours. So I was there along with Murli Karthik and Rohan Gavaskar, I remember vividly, and Atul Vasan. And I had to give an expert fan's comments. It took me a while to get the hang of it. So I don't think it was a stellar performance, and Star Sports never invited me again to comment. Part of the thing is, when you're commenting on television, the kind of stuff that you need to describe, you have to learn. That is, there's some things that the viewer can already see, so why describe it?
Yeah.
Right. And there are some things where you have to draw a line between your opinion, which may or may not be based on as good a view as the audience is getting from the cameras, versus a blunt reporting of the facts.
Yes.
I still don't think that there are very many good television commentators. I watch now a lot of highlights, and um, you'll find so much of, oh, great shot. And then the commentator should be saying, oops, because that great shot has been caught. Or a commentator will say, the ball is rolling on a fast outfield is going to get to the boundary, and of course some fielder stops it. So what's the point of these comments? I mean, the comments are neither accurate nor particularly relevant. You can actually watch the cameras following the ball for you. You can watch it. So say something else, say something about the shot, say something knowledgeable. That's why some of the ex-cricketers who say useful things like that for that kind of delivery, that was a particularly unusual shot. That's educated. Or somebody, when a bowler is setting his field, saying that's a wasted fielding position. If he's going to bowl like this, why can't that fielder be there? Michael Holding, for example, on BBC, is very good at saying that.
So
That kind of thing.
talking beyond the picture, that's the definition right now. I mean,
And giving you insights, exactly, giving you
yeah,
insights from from the commentator's expertise that 95% of the viewers won't have. So I learned so much from listening to a commentator saying that fielding position is wasted and somebody should be somewhere else, or asking, why are the slip fielders so far away? They should be, for this kind of pitch, they should be at least 1 yard closer. That kind of insight is far more useful, it seems to me, for a viewer than describing a ball rolling towards a boundary and giving your opinion of whether it's going to reach the boundary or not. Whether it reaches or not, the viewer will see it in a few seconds.
I know.
Talk something more relevant. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, talking about the World Cup 2019, we had a great cricket final. And don't you think England should have shared the World Cup with New Zealand? Your thoughts?
Well, you know, yes, I mean, in an ideal world, in a just world, yes. But given that the umpire made the ruling he did,
Yeah.
England won. I mean, whether they won fair and square, as the expression goes, is a different matter. They got 5 runs for something that they should have only got 4 for. And the irony with now looking back on all of this is it should have been, as you said, a shared World Cup. But since the world wants a winner, that's the conventional way in which the world expects sporting contests to be decided. The world got a winner. And in many, many ways, I think this defeat will be perhaps more historic in New Zealand and for many sports fans of cricket around the world than a straightforward victory would have been, because it was such a cruel defeat.
Absolutely. So, did you know that when India played the World Cup matches, most of the matches, English umpires were officiating those games, and BCCI had a grouse, and they couldn't, lodge probably an official complaint against this. So, is there any conspiracy thing? I mean, Indian team did find something there, something not right. But what are your thoughts?
No, I think the complaints in the Gavaskar era were much more justified. But in today's era, given that you have technology to come to your aid, they're less of a problem. The only area where it becomes an issue is if a biased umpire keeps getting decisions against you on umpire's call. See, that's where bias comes in. So let's say that, for argument's sake, you have an umpire who doesn't like Indians, which is the assumption behind your question, and that umpire gives you out when you're not out, or when it's a marginal call, or gives the opposing side not out when it's a marginal call, then in the DRS rules, under umpire's call, his decision stays. So those are the only scenarios in which bias can work, because in every other scenario, technology will tell you what the truth is.
Yes.
And therefore, bias is very severely circumscribed. So I think that we shouldn't exaggerate that complaint, number one. Number two, it's not in our interest to do so, because in an era of neutral umpires, we will always get umpires from various countries around the world. We may as well learn to get along with all of them. And in an era of COVID, we will get host country umpires. So in England right now, both Pakistan and Australia are having to live with English umpires when they're playing against England, which is a reversal to the old days, but plus DRS. So that's the situation right now. If India were to still be in a lockdown scenario touring England, we would have to face the same situation. And indeed, under the rules, when England tours India, as they are slated to, they will have Indian umpires if lockdowns are persisting. I understand. So all of these things have to be looked at. My gut feeling is that technology has made not only biased umpiring more difficult, but incompetent umpiring much rarer. Incompetence is shown on the camera. People lose their membership of the elite panel very quickly, etc. But bias is also very difficult because your bias is shown up by the number of decisions you make that the camera overrules. And then you again end up risking losing your status and all the perks and benefits that come with it. So there really is no advantage in being biased. That's the genuine feeling.
Absolutely, sir. We often see that the BCCI, and its state associations are very often managed by politicians, and the saying is that
not after Lodha.
So
because
yeah,
because the Lodha Commission has essentially said that nobody holding political office may hold office in an association, which ended any fantasies I might have had of trying to get involved in cricket as an administrator, which actually, with hindsight, might have been a more rewarding profession than politics sometimes. But anyway, I don't mean that entirely seriously. But the truth is that the old days of political involvement were because of what we talked about, that cricket got caught up with power, and power always attracts politicians. So anyway, let's not worry about it, because now it's over. The Lodha Commission reforms have eliminated politicians. Sons and brothers of politicians are there, but not politicians directly. And that's something which is the Indian way, as we say. I'll have to wrap up now, Indraneel. I have a 7 o'clock commitment. Do you have a last question? Then we can finish.
I want to just ask you one more thing. Two more questions. What should be those expressions? A bowler or a batsman, you get angry and you're not fined after that. So what are the safe phrases one can use on the field?
I think you're asking an MP. I should only come up with parliamentary expressions, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But when you see, if you can do any amateur lip reading of what batsmen say when they're out, or bowlers and fielders say when they take a wicket, the catch, I think nothing parliamentary is being said. So there's a lot of leeway that the umpires and referees are giving players to use what is politely referred to as expletives. And I think the expletives are deleted in terms of you can't hear the sound, but the expletives are quite visible if you can read their lips. And there's a particular 4-letter word that one sees frequently in cricket matches on the ground, which I think you can't be surprised that people use it. So I think the better reaction is to not say anything, even when you're angry, but show your displeasure. I mean, I remember a commentator saying that when Kohli is angry now, instead of screaming, he shoots bullets from his eyes at whoever he's angry with. And that's probably a more sensible way of making your point. I definitely think those players are foolish enough to get physical deserve to be fined. I mean, those who push and jostle and deliberately try and trip somebody or whatever, that's really unacceptable. But letting loose an occasional 4-letter word that is not directed at someone particularly, but just an expression of people's frustration, that's normal human behavior. And I think we should give them some leeway. They're human. They're working at a level of great intensity and passion. I think it'll be wrong for us to start policing, moral policing of 4-letter words on the cricket field.
Absolutely. So on that note, thanks a lot for sparing your time. It was really, really quite a moment for all of us, people who joined in, hearing your knowledge on the game. It's impeccable, really. I mean, really enjoyed chatting with you, sir. Hope to meet you face to face when we are able to beat this coronavirus.
When we are. Otherwise, we'll have to meet with masks on.
Yes.
And pads and gloves, no doubt. Take care. All the best. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Good night. Thank you.